wait a minute, maybe you told me to. That was working until I didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Towards the end, there were two ladies that almost came to blows over an unrelated issue, personal issue.
Maybe they're just.
Other than that,
Did she say, are we live?
Maybe they're just.
Is that what she said?
Mike's.
Are we live?
All right, it's 6 p.m., so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, everyone, for being here. This is the first, hopefully, of many panel Q&A meetings. So this is just a new format for us to use to have a discussion on this project. Each of us here up front are going to take a minute to introduce ourselves and give a little background. Then we'll open up to the audience for questions. I've got a couple of folks signed up. Then we'll take questions from the audience, and then we're going to open it up virtually. We're live streaming to Facebook Live and recording. So we're going to have folks, if they have any questions virtually, we'll address those after we've taken care of those here in person. Tonight we're discussing the Unified Development Ordinance, particularly our Module 1, these resilience ordinances that we've been talking about, but really getting feedback on the whole project as well. So we want to limit everything to that. The Coastal Resilience Overlay District, or the NIZ, that we've been talking a lot about, the land use plan that reflects that, our existing LDO, things like that. So if there's anything that's outside of that topic range, we may direct you to another subject matter expert or try to address it at another time, just so we can stay on track here. So we'll ask you to come to the podium, name and address, and have that question, and we'll kind of just have this as an informal dialogue. So let's go down the row, starting with Kyle Garner. Introduce.
Well, I guess I'm partially introduced. I'm Kyle Garner. I'm the planning director here, and I'm glad that you folks are here in attendance this evening. And this is my second go-round with the zoning or Unified Development Ordinance. Mr. Ryan Neave down the table from me, he and I worked on the last one about 12 years ago. So it's good that we're able to be here and with the consultants that we have to update these important documents. So thank you.
I'm Tyson Smith. I'm a partner at White Smith Cousineau, which is the planning firm that is leading the project. It's a pleasure to be here in Beaufort. It's been a little over a year now. I grew up the road, so it's nice to come work in a place that I grew up visiting. We was asked to make just a brief, offer a little bit of context regarding the authorities of the town. As most of you know, but it's worth reminding that cities and counties, of course, are creatures of the state. We have the powers that they say we have in the General Assembly. And in recent years, there's been a diminution of those powers, and then also just sort of a murkiness that's sort of been introduced due to some recent legislation. So may come up tonight, it may not, but certainly over the course of the project, it will come up in terms of what is the scope of the town's authority in certain areas. There was a bill passed at the end of the session last year that we sort of informally refer to as the downzoning bill, but it is sort of broad in scope. That may be revisited. That was the expectation this session. There's a small chance it'd be revisited in a short session in a few weeks, but probably more likely in the spring. So we've discussed this at length with the board and with the town attorney and the staff ever since it was passed in December. And the decision has been to sally forth and to sort of not get thrown off of our game. We'll adjust as the legislature adjusts as needed. So give you that context in case it's relevant to questions that come up tonight.
Thank you. Michelle Eitner, Town Planner. I am the team lead for staff for the UDO project. So we've got our 5 modules over the next couple of years. So I'll be walking through all of those items with the town.
I'm Kelly Cousineau, also with the consulting firm White Smith Cousineau. We're based down in Charleston, South Carolina, but like Tyson, I grew up in North Carolina as well, so it's always nice to get back to the home state. I am going to talk just real quickly about the coastal resilience overlay that we have been working on. You'll hear us refer to it as the CRO. And I'll preface this by saying anything we talk about tonight related to the Unified Development Ordinance could change before it's ultimately adopted. The expectation at this point is that the Planning Board and the Board of Commissioners will consider adoption of the consolidated UDO at the end of the project, so 2027 most likely. As far as the CRO, so there is a UDO steering committee. We have 2 planning board members and 2 commissioners on the steering committee, and they have provided input along the way on this coastal resilience overlay, and they will do so going forward. But we've met with the steering committee 6 times. We've had 2 community conversation open houses to talk about this overlay district, and town staff has also provided extensive input on the draft. So this proposed overlay achieves the goals expressed in the town's most recent CAMA land use plan, and it also implements the resiliency vision in the Resilient Beaufort Plan. Among other purposes, it's intended to improve resilience to storms and flooding in the most vulnerable areas, geographically vulnerable areas of the town. So there's the special flood hazard areas, AE and VE zones, as well as the shaded X zone. The overlay district adds a layer of regulations and in some cases offers incentives for development that occurs in those flood zones. I would encourage everybody to check out the project website. So there's a page on the town's website that gives you information about the UDO project. There's also a second website. It's called Conveo. It's beaufortnc.conveo. Is it .org? There's little QR code business cards at the front that'll take you right to it. That is going to give you all the information about upcoming meetings, past meetings, all of the meeting materials on there, the agenda packets, the slide decks, and the minutes when they're available for those meetings. There are also all of the drafts that we're working on. You're able to go on there and not just review them, but also provide comments. And those comments will go to the steering committee, the planning board, and the board of commissioners for consideration. As far as the overlay district, from here, it's going to go we had a meeting last night with a joint work session with the Board of Commissioners and Planning Board to go over the overlay district. So that's a really good resource to look at the slide deck from last night. It gives you a really good overview of the current draft. We'll take it to the Planning Board September 15th, the Board of Commissioners on October 27th, and again, we anticipate adoption in conjunction with the rest of the UDO at the end of 2027. With that, I'll turn it to Ryan.
Hi, I'm Ryan Neve. I'm the chair of the planning board, which I joined, I don't know, some 15 years ago. And as Kyle mentioned, I helped develop the current LDO a long time ago. Oh, and I'm on the steering committee with John for the UDO.
I'm John LaPiccolo. I'm current town commissioner. I'm currently on the UDO steering committee as well. I was previously on the planning board for several years before I became commissioner. And one of the things I think by being on the planning board that we realized was that some of the ordinances in the community needed to be adjusted to reflect the sentiments of the town. And the thought of the LDO at the time had been in place for years, as Ryan was one of the writers for that, but it was obvious that some of the things needed to be changed or updated to reflect that. So we're currently working on that, and the documents that we are working on are currently just that. They are drafts. They are drafts in progress, and we really do encourage everyone who's at home watching this, or those of you in the crowd, to really make your comments known. There are many variables that can be adjusted and changed, and we can debate about. And it's really important to get the town's opinion on all of these specific topics. Whether you're a homeowner, whether you're a business owner, it's very important to understand how this document can affect you and to voice your concerns. So we're glad that you're all here, and for those of you at home that you're all listening, and hopefully you will make comments and read through the documents and give us your feedback. Thank you.
All right. So now that you know a little bit more about us, I'd like to go through, I've got a sign-up sheet, so I've got a couple people signed up, so I'm going to start with Eddie Myers. If you would come up to the podium, name and address, and your questions or comments, and we'll see who's best suited to answer those.
Hi, I'm Eddie Myers. I own several properties in town. 131 Middle Lane, 1808 Lennoxville, property on Sherwood, Gallant's Landing Boat Slip, property in the ETJ. One concern I have is, and it may not be founded on anything, is in the county land use plan, they made a reference to, at some point in time, the town may deem where they will not extend services to existing properties in the NIZ. And just curious where that would come from, what precedent that is, if sewer or utilities are denied a property based on an event, where did that come from? And what will be the result for the property owner? I think it was 196 of the county land use plan
Yes.
where the sentence was, paragraph was.
I will say,
There are 1,100 properties in the NIC.
right, we're not considering at this time restricting access for any properties in the NIC. As far as the backing for where that came from in our land use plan, I may defer to, were you on land use plan committee, or Kyle?
I guess I will. So that came out of the committee, and that was one of the recommendations that the committee had as part of the land use plan. I will point out, Mr. Myers, that as I've said, the land use plan is a plan. It is not an ordinance. It is not something that the town uses for standards or anything else. It is a guiding document, and it has recommendations in there, and that's for this committee to look at some of those recommendations. Some of those ideas, concepts that came out of there have been included, such as some of the incentives, and some others have not been fully endorsed, and they have been modified or changed or added some flexibility, as Commissioner LaPiccola mentioned earlier. So I think that is where we are from the standpoint of the land use plan, but where it came out of was the land use plan committee that said that the town should look at this for the future. Now, as this document says, or moving forward, that could change if the next land use plan comes out. I mean, there could be other things that come in the land use plan, and you're looking at a document that should be updated every 10 years or so. So that's a possibility.
And the historic homes that are not in the HBD or HWBD or area, I mean, there is integrity with the state of North Carolina, State of Preservation, SHPO, et cetera. You know, we've had trouble in the past elevating those houses and meeting historical integrity. And that's something I think needs to be looked at very closely and as we go forward.
Can I take that one too, Michelle? I'll take that one as well. Since you've given me the door, you've opened it, I appreciate that. Our Historic Commission is working on updating its standards as well, which should be coming out either late this winter, hopefully for adoption. As part of that, our resiliency standards, which includes elevation of structures that are in peril or also in those special flood hazard areas. And these came out from the Secretary of Interior of the United States, as well as from the State Historic Office. And these are recommendations. Beaufort was part of a pilot project which encourages those types of structures being elevated out of the flood zones. And so you'll see that probably coming earlier this winter.
But back to question one is I think last night you said there were 85 properties, vacant lots in the NIZ. Give or take, yeah.
That was residential lots with multifamily or townhouse, existing multifamily or townhouse developments on them.
So there is no restrictions on a vacant lot being able to, existing platted vacant lot, being able to connect to town In NIZ.
Correct, that's correct. The UDO steering committee did talk about the provision that you referenced in the CAMA plan and installation of new infrastructure and an extension of existing infrastructure in the non-intensification zone. And ultimately, they did not decide to add anything to the coastal resilience overlay that would prohibit either of those things. There is a prohibition on allowed uses. So one is a prohibition of new critical facilities in the NIZ.
Right, I got that right.
Okay, and that includes like water treatment plants, but it doesn't include pump stations and water lines to
This is
individual.
single-family development I'm talking about. Single-family detached.
That you're talking about, yes. So there wouldn't be restrictions on that. The overlay district does prohibit new residential uses other than single-family detached houses, and that's where that 85 properties came in, just to give the board some information as to how many properties that provision could affect.
And one last thing I'll share is, I don't think there's a VE property in town.
There may be,
I mean, not,
Something along the edge,
maybe
but-
touching the shoreline, but not,
There is in our extraterritorial
in
jurisdiction.
ETJ, there's Bronner Road, and
And we
the
do have,
new one's gonna bring a few other into it.
yeah, we've got preliminary maps where the VE will be coming in, but that's more of a structural concern.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Yes, sir, thank you. All right, next on our list, I've got Doug Brady.
Good evening, my name is Doug Brady, I'm at 805 Front Street, Beaufort, and I really didn't know what this was really, the format of this, so I feel like some of my comments are really preaching to stuff you already know, and just my thoughts about them. But I did, I guess, want to start with a few questions so that I understand the wording and the proposed language and the proposed impacts of the language that is in the draft. I think it's all pretty well said that there are a few areas that are exempt, and there also, in this new draft, there is the opportunity to rebuild on the existing footprint, existing impervious, if the property is destroyed by a natural disaster or something to that effect. Is that correct in that?
That's correct, for detached single-family houses.
That's just for detached single-family houses. So if I own an apartment building, I own a townhome, I own a duplex, and it burns down, I cannot rebuild it.
You can rebuild it, but you have to meet whatever the current regulations are with respect to setbacks, impervious surface.
So if I own an apartment complex that has the required amount of parking for 20 apartments, and there are some of these areas, or townhomes, and I have a mortgage on it, I buy it, it burns down. I can't rebuild it as it stands.
And that reflects current requirements. The nonconformity provisions in our ordinance is current.
Well, but what if it's
Don't extend
conforming?
townhouse.
What if it's conforming?
If it's conforming, then you're fine.
Right, but under this new thing, it probably is not conforming if it has over 6,000, or actually if it's residential, it would be in the NIZ, which there are probably fewer, but you did identify, I think, 85 properties. I wasn't here last night, so I'm not sure if those 85 properties were in the NIZ or were they in your entire overlay?
In the NIZ.
Okay, let's take that, for example. So right now, there are 85 properties that are either townhome, duplex, or apartments that are existing in the NIZ. If they burn down, they have to conform to the new impervious surfaces that are in, which would probably, in most cases, prevent them from rebuilding what they have. And when it comes to apartment buildings, which are businesses basically for a lot of people, that they go mortgage buy based on cash flow, and it burns down or is destroyed by a hurricane, these people will potentially have a mortgage, cannot rebuild what they have, and basically could be put into bankruptcy. because they can't pay off what they got. I just don't understand that. I think people really don't understand what this proposed language is going to do to their property values, to their ability to rebuild, and really to their freedom. Now, I understand the reasoning for it, but when you go enact ordinances and regulations that impact people's livelihoods, their ability to utilize their property, the ability to sell their property and get a better return, I think you need to be really careful on what you're doing, and you need to educate the impacted people. I don't think people in our community have a clue what this is going, the proposed language might do to them. So let's look at some of that. As I understand it, if I have a house that, and there's many of this in town, this happens a lot in Beaufort, they buy an old house, maybe it's in their family, maybe somebody's died and the children want to sell it. Somebody right now in the historic district or in most any other districts except OR5S can put their home on the market, realize the value. This house may be sitting on 5,000 impervious surface with the parking and the patio and the outdoor kitchen if it has it, and the shed and all that, and the house footprint. And if this passes, when somebody goes to tear down that house, they will have to conform to the new regulations. And these new regulations are 3,000 square feet in the NIZ. I don't think the town has looked at how many properties that will impact, that houses and parking pads and sheds and patios are sitting in this town that don't meet those requirements. And if those people want to rebuild, they cannot do it as it stands. And when that happens, it is going to, and they can't sell it. Nobody's going to buy a house on Front Street in an 8,000 square foot lot and build a 2,400 square foot pad and have to park and have to put in the back of the house and pay what they're paying now. They'll buy it, but they're not going to pay what they're paying now. And I don't think, the town may not care about that, but the people that own that house or own that property or the heirs that own that property do care. They need to know what, I think you need to do an inventory of all properties that are not conforming to this and send the property owner get in touch with them. Make sure they understand what is happening. They may be fine with it, and that's fine, but I don't think, we had a bad experience with the waterfront committee. I'm not saying this is a waterfront committee because y'all didn't have open meetings, where all of a sudden people weren't really paying attention, and then all of a sudden when it got elevated, people paid attention, right? And all of a sudden the whole thing went a different direction. You don't want to come down to the end of this thing, in my opinion, and start passing ordinances, and all of a sudden everybody goes, well, we didn't really understand what this was about. We didn't know how it was going to impact our property. And then what's going to happen when you go to pass it? I think you're going to have impacted property owners probably crawling it. So let's go through the NIZ, and I'm not going to take a lot of time, but I just went on Marsh Street. Marsh Street throws a pocket.
Doug, do you want us to respond to any of these items?
No, if I'm misreading the ordinance, yes.
It might be worth some clarification, I think. Yeah, I think one thing I'd point out, this is going to be sort of a Q&A discussion, is that I think the objection you have is to a fundamental principle in any zoning code, and that is that over time it would be implemented as things change. If something gets destroyed by any means, over 50%, different communities have different percentages, then it would come into compliance completely or to some large degree so that the vision of the town can eventually be implemented over time. So it's a reasonable objection, but it's one to what's in place today. Now, is that worth clarifying maybe? Is that the case?
Well, if I can respond to you, I don't have an objection to impervious coverages potentially.
Okay, sure.
But going to the impervious coverages that this is proposing is a significant impact.
Okay.
Right now, the only impervious coverage that anything has ever built in town, and I may be wrong, of all the older stuff, is the R5S, which requires 50% coverage of the lot. Everybody else has been able to, over the years, do whatever they wanted to, and certainly these older houses, and many houses in town have built parking pads, they've built sheds, they've built outdoor patios. It's just not the footprint of the house. So I want to go Marsh Street. There's a pocket of the NIZ. I just took Marsh Street as an example, and I spent 5 minutes on this, going through the GIS and look at the houses that are right on Marsh Street, 105, 107, 109, 117, 104, and 106. Every one of those houses, footprints and parking pads are over 3,000 feet by significant numbers. These are little lots, houses in the historic district. These people, not one of them's here. But if they want to, some of these houses are maybe they want to renovate them. If they go to renovate them under this ordinance, they're going to find that they can't do what they can't adhere to what they've got. If this is,
That would be the case today, though.
but it's not, there is no impervious restriction on these lots.
Right.
I mean, it's not what it is today. And I'm not saying it should be, I'm maybe advocating for 4,000 or 5,000 instead of 3,000. I just think that when you give an arbitrary number of 3,000, you need to
Where's
document.
3,000 coming from? That's not in any of our
I mean,
documents.
30%, excuse me, 30%. So on a 5,000 square foot lot, you've got 1,500 feet. I mean, 5,000, you've got 1,500 feet of impervious.
So there is a base of 2,500 square feet or 30%, whichever is greater, that protects those smaller properties.
Well, let's go to that on the 25, there's not all of them adhere to get a 2,500 foot pass.
It's for detached single-family houses only, that's correct.
Right.
25.
So if you go to the duplexes, and you go to the townhomes, and you go to the apartments, and you go to the businesses, which is a different number, 50, 60%, depending on you, and they don't get a pass anywhere. You've already identified 85 parcels in NIZ that, I guess if you own a duplex in NIZ and you want, it burns down or you want to renovate it, you cannot do that. Is that correct? Over 50%.
You can, it just has to come into compliance.
Well, how, if a duplex is not allowed in the NIZ,
Right.
how could you tear it down and rebuild it?
Why don't we start with, what is the rule today on that? If it was 50% and a non-conforming use is destroyed completely?
If a duplex is in a single-family residential district today, and it burns down tonight, you cannot come in tomorrow and apply for a duplex to go back on that property.
I'm not saying it's non-conforming, it's conforming.
You haven't said that until now.
Well, no, I know, I think there are conforming duplexes in the NIZ. There are conforming apartments in the NIZ,
Okay.
correct?
May have misunderstood.
I mean, I just think, I don't understand that. I really don't understand why we're limiting it to single-family detached homes. That's the point. I don't understand why we're limiting it to 30% on some of these lots that we know are gonna have an issue. The R8 zoning has many lots that are over 30%, and that's 2,400 square feet. And so I'll wrap it up by simply saying that I asked the town to reach out to the potential impacted property owners, to try to touch them, try to make them understand what might be happening to their property. impervious coverages covers a lot of things, as you know, as I went through it. So when people start adding up impervious coverage, I don't think they necessarily, a lot of people probably don't understand what it is on their lot and what they can and cannot do. As far as the business goes, I really don't understand why an existing business, Vic Fasolino could not build his building where Historic Grounds is now under this proposed ordinance. And I think things like that he's done and other things, I don't know about the new building he's doing, but I'm talking about the one on Cedar Street, because I measured the impervious surface in the building. I think that's what we want. We want to encourage redevelopment in certain areas. So I think maybe look at different areas and not just try to say that they're all equal. And I question whether, the new Piggly Wiggly Shopping Center was sold. Wouldn't it be nice if somebody went in there and renovated it and made it really nice? But if this proposed ordinance was in place, I do not think that they could renovate a shopping center like that without losing a lot of area or a lot of, well, they'd have to have their parking. So they would be severely impacted. So I just ask that, again, you kind of look at, instead of trying to paint it all with a broad brush, look at some of these areas that are impacted in more detail, make sure that the potential people that are being impacted really know what's happening, make sure the business owners really know how this might impact them, and I think it'll go a lot further. Look, I think there's good things, and I think there's negative things here from my perspective, but I just think everybody needs to understand how it might impact them, and and they may choose not to come to me. They may be fine with it. But I think some of this has some significant potential impacts on property owners. Thank you.
All right, Ms. Joyce?
Good evening. Thank you all for doing this. I'm Joyce McCune, and I live at 608 Ann Street, and also have commercial properties in the historic district downtown. I tried to listen last night, and the sound was bad. I couldn't understand a lot of what was being said. I have heard that you are saying that the historic district will be exempted from the overlay of the NIZ zone. Is that correct?
The historic business districts.
The historic business, but not the residential.
Right.
Correct, right. And it's exempt from most, but not all provisions. So it's exempt from the impervious surface provisions and most of the buffer provisions.
The historic district,
Historic
the
business
waterfront
district.
historic business
The
district.
historic
But not our
business
whole
district.
local historic district, just the waterfront areas.
So the individual residences then in the historic district would come under the NIZ and the impervious requirements now. Okay. I have some serious issues with that because, as Doug has pointed out, a lot of these houses have grown over the years and have not had restrictions on impervious. And, the fabric of our historic district, we've got the local historic district, it's a small district. We've got the national that is a larger district. We have a traditional neighborhood on the north side of Cedar Street that is very small lots over there. And I'm concerned about how this kind of thing is going to affect those people. Rebuilding, if a historic home burns down or is damaged in a storm, it's more expensive to rebuild because they're going to come before the HPC and we're going to want wood windows and, there's that consideration for people. I just don't want us to get into a situation of unintended consequences with this new UDO where we are actually hurting some things that are really of great value to our community. And so I hope, please think about these issues. Think about our traditional neighborhoods to the north side of Cedar Street. And I'm also concerned about properties getting more expensive. If you can't have the freedom to rebuild? You know, is there, when, with the consultants, are y'all going to be considering, does this actually make it harder to have affordable housing in town? I mean, my husband and I have several duplexes. We've sold our apartments now, but, you know, we've always tried to keep our rents low because it is hard to live in Beaufort and work in a restaurant or a bank or, you know, to be those kind of people. So we don't want to force those people out with the NIZ zone and making less land available for people to build on and live on. So those were my concerns, questions. Thank you.
You want to respond?
Yeah. Thank you for the comment so far, and I think it is really useful to us to hear about specific cases where the proposed rules might run up against problems with real life. So some things that come to mind is it would be helpful to get feedback on what people think a reasonable amount of square feet of impervious surface is on a typical lot. So around here we have 5,000 square foot lots. What would be a reasonable amount of pervious surface to have on a 5,000 square foot lot or an 8,000 square foot lot? We struggled a bit with the numbers, and we did some surveys of some existing properties, but it's hard to do at a reasonable cost, sort of a comprehensive survey of the entire town. And so, yeah, if there are specific cases of things that might run into trouble with this ordinance, I think the steering committee would love to hear about that and see if we can't address those.
And I think it's important to bring up these instances here. I even made a comment last night at the board meeting about, you know, how we arbitrarily came up with these numbers for lot coverage. And I still think there's definitely room for discussion and for adjustment of those numbers so that it can help, can maybe conform more to more lots in our community. To me, the goal of this is not to our current homeowners or even business owners. I think it's important that, you know, these people who are business owners in our town, they've been the fabric of the community, they have investments and so forth, and we do not want to put, I think, them into a position where now their investments are devalued. I'd like to see lots of grandfathering rules for business owners, and even for potential for pathways or specific pathways for even for historic homes to apply to make sure that they are able to be grandfathered with lot dimensions and lot coverage as well. But obviously, there's other homeowners that can be affected, so we really need to try to make sure we're getting the feedback from the community, and as one of the speakers said, that the community is aware of what's going on. So the word needs to get out. People need to be attending these meetings and giving us their feedback on this. So.
Excellent. So that's the list of folks that I've got here. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to come up? Yes, sir, front row. Yes, please. Come to the podium, name and address.
Couple things concerned me, and after having a conversation and looking around, not even many of you know how long I was involved with this town. One smiling certainly does. We lost recently 2 teachers at East Carteret with 21 years of service. Would anyone like to venture a guess why we lost them? Does anyone have the slightest idea? Did they leave because they just didn't like it here anymore? Did they leave because they can't afford it? And yet, there were decisions made that there was supposed to be workforce housing, where now, because something was sold and evidently a decision was made without a lot of sound thought behind it, that it was fine for it to be exclusive housing. And I'm talking about the property behind Food Line. I thought it was the 6 o'clock meeting tonight, and I would have come. I had told Kyle yesterday that I had 2 meetings today, and I have spent the better part, which most people know, the last 30 years helping this town, either being directly involved. And I think it was 18 years ago, Kyle, we figured out was the last time this was actually done. That
No.
these rules were changed.
13 years.
2013?
13 years ago.
Anyway, I think what happened, and I'm sure it happened, because no one thought to ask, why don't we have workforce housing in that project behind Food Line or alongside Food Line when it was designated that way? And evidently because of a sale to someone else, and they had plans for the exact opposite of workforce housing. That's why we lose people like the 2 teachers that left because they can't afford here. But workforce housing is meant not only for teachers, it's meant for anyone in a community, whether it's someone that works for John, whether it's someone that works in town hall, whether it's a policeman, a fireman. The people that you don't want to have to travel 20 or 30 miles to come where they work because there is no affordable housing. That area up there was never, ever supposed to be cavalierly changed, because evidently a decision was made, and it was made, the only word I can think of really is cavalierly, where there wasn't a lot of questions asked. Why is it not workforce housing there when that's what it was designated for? How did it get changed? And what are the ramifications? And yet I think that mistakes like that can still be rectified very easily. There have even been times when people that had the type of housing that's now done there, that we put rules into effect. And when I'm saying we, I'm not only talking in this community, but in many communities in the state or across the country, that a certain amount of land and properties that were built would have to include people that would be charged what would be equivalent to a workforce house. I'll give you one example. In New Jersey, we had a community where the zoning was 10 acres, Far Hills, New Jersey. That's where Forbes, Onassis, that's where all the big money is. And the houses there, back before there was ever $1 million house in North Carolina, because I came down 50 years ago at that point, realizing I had come from Wall Street and realized that the growth was going to be in the South for our kids. And it wasn't hard to pick up. But even in Far Hills, New Jersey, what was accomplished was that the community got together and they decided that a certain percentage of land, houses, opportunities had to be afforded to people that needed what we consider, even today, workforce housing. I think you all have the time to change it. I'm not sure that we'd get those 2 teachers back, but I'm not sure that we wouldn't, because talking to people in this town and teachers that I know intimately, some being related. They spoke about how good they were, and the ones doing the speaking are known to be the best. And they're only here because they have husbands that have jobs that they can afford to stay here without that. But most people can't. And what I implore you to do is to rethink some of it. I'm not asking you to change something in its entirety. I'm asking you to get together first with your people here in town, what makes sense to do. And once that decision is made, then bring in the people that bought the property. I think by now they know how lucky they were that they, in effect, really stole something that never should have happened. So I don't think it would be too hard in having a conversation with people like that if you came up with something that it'll be a win-win for all people. And I think you all are capable of that. I know most of you up there, and you have that ability. So thank you very much.
Yes, sir. I know that affordable housing, I think Tyson's used the term attainable housing, workforce housing is definitely something that's on the forefront for this project. Do you guys want to make any comments on that specifically?
Yeah, when we get to the chapters that deal with that, I think there's a lot of things that we can look at to try to address that. I know that's a big issue here and elsewhere. It's something the town has struggled with over the years.
Yeah, that used to be something we'd see in various communities, but now the affordability issue is really chronic and really comes up in every community we work in. And I'd point the community also to the UDO codes assessment that we did last year, and there are a number of references in there to the work that we did and the discussions we had, so rest assured that's coming up. Probably Module 2, Kelly, I would say a good bit of that'll start. So that'd be
Probably, yeah.
so later this year, early next year, starting to get into those topics as well. The things we did talk about during the assessment were things like density bonuses and encouraging accessory dwelling units, mix of housing types, so it's not all single family, density bonuses, parking reductions, those sorts of things that can incentivize workforce housing, that's the sort of thing. So hang in there with us. We'll definitely be getting to that topic as we move forward. Board of comments.
Is anybody else in the audience? Yes, sir.
Thank you. I'm Charles Llewellyn. I live on 907 Ann Street. Been here about 20 years. And I want to thank you all for working on this. A few comments. One is it seems like a very slow process. We go all the way to 2027. These are issues that are cropping up very quickly. We have climate change. Believe it or not, there's climate change. Sea levels are rising. Sea's getting warmer. We are under threat from nature to try to maintain what we have here in Beaufort. And it seems to me that you're doing an excellent job of trying to look at these things and see how we can change some of those things that we can change to make ourselves more resilient to these activities. And so I really applaud you from doing this, and I would urge you, if there's any way possible, just to speed it up instead of slowing it down. I mean, 2027 to get to this, these we know what's going on, and we know what's going on now. Now, I moved here to Beaufort 20 years ago because I wanted to live in the coolest small town in North Carolina, in the country, and that's what this was. During that time, in the past 20 years, I've seen fairly uncontrolled development going on and putting in a lot of large complexes which were open land. Now, if you're doing that for affordable housing, that would be okay, because we need affordable housing. But it seems like an awful lot of development was made out of pure greed. People want to make as much money as they can. And a lot of these people are not from here. They're from off. I was from off, but these are people coming in, doing this, trying to put as many housing units into a parcel there, and then selling them for the maximum amount of money they can. And it is changing our community. It's changing the environment. It's creating problems with parking, with access to services, and increased problems with the sewers and water and everything else. I am not anti-development, but I just want to see things done in a way that's best for the community. So when you have a lot of these things that you're putting in place, it seems like it makes sense to have this. But for people to come and say, oh, but if you do that, we won't be able to make as much money as we would have if we could do anything we wanted to, as a citizen here, that doesn't impress me very much. And I'd like you to consider the overall impact on the development of this community, and not just how much money someone might lose. Sure, it's good to make money, and it's fine to do that, but not at the expense of the coolest small town in this country. I've said before, if I wanted to live in Cary, I would have bought a house in Cary. I didn't. I came here and bought a house in Beaufort. And I love Beaufort, and I applaud you for trying to maintain that life we can have here. Because as the sea levels rise, we're going to be under a lot more resistance. Anything we can do, we have to do. If it inconveniences a few people, I'm sorry. But I would rather have Beaufort here in another 50 years than to have a few people make a few bucks quickly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And for everyone here and everyone watching at home, this project is 5 modules over the next couple of years. That's separated into different topics for each module. I've got my little board down here, but you can also find it on our website. And we're doing it slowly, methodically, to make sure we're not missing anything and to make sure we have enough public engagement. So we've done a lot of public outreach and engagement through this module, and we'll continue to do through the next couple of modules, because we want to make sure that we're getting the input that we're getting tonight, that we've been getting at our outreach events, and that we hope to continue to get both virtually and in person throughout the next couple of years. So we don't want to miss anyone and rush things. But I do agree that the need, if we could get it all done now and be done with it, that would be great, and go ahead and play. But we want to make sure that it's done right and done correctly.
I did want to add that I do appreciate you having these meetings so that people can learn of what's going on. And I think you're doing a good job with that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And I point out, the resilience piece will largely be finished this year. So it's not the resilience piece that will take 2 years. That's the first module, to use Michelle's terminology, and we anticipate that being wrapped up in October, November timeframe.
Yes.
But not adopted.
Probably not adopted.
Yeah. We'll make all the pieces and then put them together. So Module 2 is zoning and uses. Module 3 is development and design standards. Module 4 is subdivision and site design, and then Module 5 will be our administration and procedures. So we've got a lot coming forward. So our discussions on how to address affordable housing is coming up. Our discussion on how to address short-term rentals is coming up. commercial design standards, things like that. We haven't addressed it yet, but we are addressing it through this 3-year process. Yes, sir. No. Come on up to podium, name and address. The microphones won't pick you up if you're speaking from the audience. That's why we have you come to the podium for the microphone.
My name is Keith Walker. I live at 103 Turner Street Way in Beaufort, North Carolina. I'm also the Executive Director of East Carolina Community Development Corporation, and we build affordable housing in Beaufort. I just want to make sure it's understood by your committee that the impacts that you're making in these new ordinances will have a direct line impact on affordable housing. I don't need to express, that has already been said, that Beaufort is becoming unaffordable. I moved here in 1986. I lived in a house, a trailer, which is under a highway right now. That trailer right now, that type of trailer right now is over $200,000 if it was on somebody else's piece of property. The average cost of the house in Beaufort is roughly, according to what we heard about what's going on next to Food Lion, about $300,000. That's actually a retirement house for somebody from afar. I understand that you're also dealing with issues of you can't treat one group differently than the other one. But if I have one more thing to say, is whatever ordinances is somebody who does this for a living, we are competing against a hot market. And when Highway 42 opens up, there'll be a floodgate of people discovering Carteret County. And I want to make sure you understand that if you want to have affordable housing, there should be some ordinances within your affordable housing plan that talks about affordable housing. I just finished 48 units of multifamily housing on Professional Park Drive, which actually we put together many, many years ago, 20 years ago at the town of Beaufort. Right now, it is almost unattainable to build affordable housing for people at 60, 50, 40, and 30% of median income in the town. The amount of soft money that had to be derived to just meet the ordinances that you have in place right now in the town of Beaufort is stellar. I don't know, literally, it's almost like act of God finding free money to actually build something that's gonna last 20 years. So I would hope that when you are doing that module on affordable housing development, that you're also encouraging those people who are real estate developers, real estate professionals, be part of that discussion. Because I think you're gonna have to outreach to them, because everybody's really busy, and everybody doesn't have time to come to a meeting at 4 o'clock in the afternoon to talk about affordable housing or housing development. And I'm just hoping that you hear us loudly, because it's kind of a very diverse crowd of people today talking about affordable housing and the impact you're going to have in the community. I want to thank you very much for your time. I look forward to talking to you, and I will be at or somebody from my office will be at your next sessions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Jacob?
Hey, go up some. I'm Jacob Boyd. I'm at 130 Charles Street. And I had a couple of questions, but a couple of things kind of popped in my mind as everybody was talking. First, I want to thank all of you, the town staff, the consultants, the UDO steering committee. I know y'all put a lot of time and effort in really trying to align this first module and the rest of the modules with the Cameron Land Use Plan, which, I think had a tremendous amount of community engagement and community feedback, and a lot of time and effort went into that. So I really appreciate that, and I know a lot of us, came to that first meeting and really, that was some of our concern to make sure that it did closely align with the Cameron Land Use Plan. I think y'all have done a terrific job with that, so I appreciate it. I feel like the term NIZ's kind of been thrown around, and it's just another acronym and term about the things you won't be allowed to do, but not really getting back to why it was there in the first place. And from my understanding, the whole point of the NIZ is the vulnerability to flood. It's in a 100-year floodplain. It's in these areas that are going to continue to be vulnerable to not only day-to-day, but hurricanes and other storming activities. So the whole intent is to try not to put more or larger infrastructure in these areas. So it's not limiting all of the infrastructure, it's just trying to be smart moving forward as these areas are going to be flooded and prone to storm damage and things like that. So, unfortunately times have changed as well as sea level rise, the intensity of storms, the frequency of storms. So I don't think it is, while there may be some downsides to it, I don't think I think it is smart to not continue to build back exactly the way things are in these areas, knowing that there will continue to be exacerbating things that will make it in the future even more vulnerable. And also, I mean, from my understanding, the percentages that y'all came up with weren't necessarily arbitrary. Y'all based those on other communities and looking at other, so I mean, it's not like y'all came up with the 25 or the 30% or the 2,500 just, out of the blue sky. I mean, a lot of time and effort went into the research for that. So I appreciate that as well. So I did have just a couple of specific questions. Is it that, from my understanding in NIZ, it's proposed to still have the 30-foot buffer from any development from the water?
20-foot.
20-foot buffer. Was any consideration made for increasing that setback from the shoreline?
There was some discussion. There is an existing CAMA buffer or CAMA setback of 30 feet.
Yeah.
So this is kind of less restrictive in terms of the width, but more restrictive in terms of what can happen in that 20 feet than what can happen in the CAMA buffer now.
Okay, great, thank you. And I know that it looked like the town wants to move forward, well, and I believe it was on page 12 about the hardening of the shoreline, and I know that the CAMA land use plan had recommended to do a shoreline management plan, and that hasn't been able to be done yet, and so the recommendation in there for now is to suggest not to allow hardened structures in these areas, at least until a land use or a shoreline management plan can be completed to, so is there any specific timeline or, for actually doing within this process, getting the shoreline management plan done to be able to incorporate that by the time the ordinance are rolling out to be adopted?
We first wanted to have the framework in this ordinance to piece that in. That plan's not going to be done as a part of this work, so it'll be kind of separate. We're looking at towards the end of this process or even the year after to do that management plan, and that'll identify the areas where it is appropriate to have hardened shorelines, and then where we do want to see natural shorelines or living shorelines. So that is going to inform on the ordinance from there. So that, I think, towards the end of this process or afterwards.
Okay, great. And we would be happy to work with the town. We're also work with the Coastal Federation. We're actually working with the town, or actually not the town, Morehead City. I know they don't like to be referred to as the town of Morehead City anymore, on a shoreline management plan now, and we've previously worked with Nags Head, so I think that could be something we could try to get done sooner rather than later, try to identify funds. But, I think that's, I really appreciate all the work that y'all are doing. I know this is just the first module, but, I don't really think it's conjecture to say that really this first module and that resilience piece really is the most important part of really as the whole UDO process work moves forward, because we do live in a small coastal town, and it's not just about the impacts to habitat or environmental impacts, which I'm obviously concerned about. It's about not putting infrastructure in harm's way or continuing to put infrastructure the same way in harm's way, and just, not anti-development, but building smarter and taking low-impact development considerations in a lot of these really areas that are also pristine. So thanks for your time.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
There was a point brought up on the percentages again, and it's probably worth noting that the percentages that we have in the draft version are in line with percentages that are currently required by local towns such as Morehead City and Atlantic Beach. So I think currently, my understanding is in those towns, they already have impervious surface limits of a similar nature.
I think Beaufort is one of the only towns in the area that does not have impervious coverage limitations for the majority of the town. So we're just coming up to bar with what everybody else is doing in the planning realm and in the local context. Yes.
There are variables in other communities. These are a little bit more restrictive at Morehead City, I think. Maybe not as restrictive as some parts of Atlantic Beach. So there are variables across the area. They can be, they can have that discussion about where we want to land with this as we evaluate properties in the community. And obviously, we're talking about, when we talk about resilience, most of the resilience we're talking about here is flooding. And And we do want to be able to incorporate parts of the land use plan for mitigation of flood risk. That's why that's included in some of the documents that are part of this project.
And there are incentives for certain construction standards that allow increased impervious coverage limitation, or increased impervious coverage. For example, certain roof type or strengths, some of these different construction standards that we can't necessarily require for single-family homes in the state of North Carolina, but we want to encourage. So we're giving back some of that impervious coverage for folks that are going to maybe wire in operable shutters, wire in a generator, those sorts of things that you already want to put on a new house to make it more resilient, so then they can get back some of that impervious coverage.
Michelle, that leads right into a question that came in online from Cindy Cash. She asked that you discuss the pervious, impervious surface restrictions and the differences in the current ordinances.
So the current ordinance, we have the one district, RS5, residential single family with lots of 5,000 square feet, and that has a 50% impervious coverage limitation. That's the only district currently that has a limitation, and so we kind of looked at that and said, well, they're allowed, that 2,500 square feet, so we kind of used that as our baseline to move forward with the impervious coverage limitation. And the consultants did some review of different areas in town and looked at the impervious coverage for existing properties against, NIZ, non-NIZ, residential, non-residential, and got a better idea of what is existing currently to kind of back our way into what a reasonable and contextual impervious coverage limitation might be for us to move forward with. And those are currently just within the NIZ, which is the 100-year floodplain, or the moderate sub-district, which is the 500-year floodplain, but we are looking at, in the future, having impervious coverage limitations for other areas in town. So this wouldn't just be the areas that are in these high-risk floodplain areas, but also the rest of town.
And I'd like to expand on some of that if I can,
Absolutely.
Michelle. I know that Commission Member Neve and I were part of that RS5 as well as Mr. Kelly, who spoke earlier. And that was a new concept for Beaufort, and Commission Member Neve we did a lot of education with that, because the underlying zoning districts for most of those lots were residential 8, which also rendered them non-conforming. So going through that process and having those percentages, 50% was just a number that was created or came out of planning board discussions, and so that's how the 50% got started for the RS5. So I thought some good context there. Mr. Neve, if you've got anything you'd like to add on that.
You could probably answer this better than I can, but it seems to have worked pretty well in the, I don't know how many years it's been since we implemented that, and it's been taking effect.
It's been almost 15 years.
Yeah, and there are a lot of properties in that district, so.
Yes.
And having worked with impervious coverage limitations before, there are ways, your driveway could be used as a different material, and so then it wouldn't count towards your impervious coverage limitation. And so you get a little bit of wiggle room on that if you use different materials. So that's something that we've talked about as well. If you don't pave your whole lot with conventional concrete, then you get a little bit of that flexibility.
I think another point that we haven't quite got to yet that will also play into this are in your zoning districts that you have in the setback areas that you would be required, because those areas generally also would remain permeable. So that automatically you would get some permeability, that's right, out of that just by the actual standards of each district. So each district right now has those setbacks, and even though it may not have that quotient of 50%, you're still getting permeability relatively in each district.
just thinking about possibly the Ms. Cash that had a question, concern for a duplex or a townhome on a property or lot that is in the NIZ that may be non-conforming. These are people's homes. We do not want, I don't want to create a situation where we are affecting homeowners who may not be able to rebuild. And to me, it's really, that's a hard, I think, thing to swallow. We talk about developers this or developers that. These are homeowners who, this is their lives, their homes. To me, I want to make sure that there is a pathway for them to be able to rebuild this. And I think these are hard discussions and things we need to talk about, but they're very important issues.
I think one of the issues is that we were seeing we didn't want to increase density of development in high-risk areas, especially housing types that may be better suited to, that may be used as affordable housing. We don't want to put more people who, may be at a greater risk in more risky areas. We want to bring those people upland, into the community, into a centralized area, especially as we're seeing sea level rise or flooding or sunny day flooding, those things that we're starting to see. So it was also kind of not an environmental justice issue, but just making sure that we're taking care of all the different types of things that we want to see on better suited land. Do we have any other comments in the audience here? Yes, sir. Come on up.
Can you state that one more time, what you just said?
That was a discussion that we had in the steering committee when we've got like apartment complexes or multifamily housing. We want those people to be in some of the better suited areas of town. That is not to put them in flood-prone areas.
Right.
That kind of thing.
But you realize you're talking about the most valuable land in town. So you're taking affordable, you're setting up a rule, saying we don't want to put poor people there. I don't want to put poor people in a place they're going to be in danger. Or make an investment, millions of dollars in an area that's going to serve one purpose, but not really take care of something in a hurricane or a flood. And what are you advocating that the city or town make investment in buying land so that you could have a blended mixed community? If that makes sense? Because land prices, the price of land is only going to go up. So where you want to put people at, so you have a neighborhood of all diverse people with different incomes, are going to be very expensive land. And even the incentives that you talked about, such as, density, less parking, maybe tap and impact fee, things that can be maneuvered so that it makes that house/apartment complex more affordable, takes political buy-in and political will. And for somebody who's been over here for 30 years, I haven't seen that political will. I've been in this room with commissioners, not recently, who have not really advocated for any changes in the rules to make it easier to build affordable housing, attainable housing, than it would be for somebody coming in building, market rate housing for the masses. So my question is, are you advocating that the city get involved in making sure those incentives it's clarity with the incentives, and you're willing to make that investment, recommend that investment, to actually have a diverse community? I know we're talking about the UDO, but we're kind of blending it all into what is Beaufort going to look like 20 years from now. The other thing I'm thinking about is, as somebody who builds affordable housing, I'm already building housing at the maximum amount of regulation. To add any more regulations on top of that makes it more difficult for me to build a single-family house. If I have to look at the zoning type and then add in the NIZ and then talk about impervious surface, you only have so much land to build a house on, And sooner or later, that footprint gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So you should also think about that as you're putting these plans together. And again, I ask, as you're getting to that section in your plan, invite people like myself and other people to come in and be part of that conversation, so we can maybe plan one out and see what it kind of looks like. We need to have affordable housing in town, not just public housing, but we're talking about housing for teachers, that everybody else who's not retired and living on the waterfront. I hate to say that, but that's kind of a very expensive real estate. People we each have to serve are people who are actually working within the community, and they're going to show up here. Because when highway does open and people start moving here, they're going to need services, and somebody's going to have to work with them. So I had to say thank you.
Thank you.
For your time.
Hey, Keith, could you stay there for a minute? I'd like to make a comment with them, because there are many different types.
Mr. Kelly, grab that microphone for us if you would, sir.
There are many different types of affordable housing, and I've known Keith for a number of years, and what he does and where he does it is wonderful. But the teachers, for example, or a fireman or other people, we're trying to get them where they can afford to live in a community where the community, the world leaders before, that they wanted to start everything as a rich county. They wanted to start at 350. And supposedly when Mercer came in years ago, he came in to build affordable housing. I think Keith is very familiar with Mercer, as I was, having lived there at one time. And Mercer, if he started that way, did not end that way. What Keith has done is been consistent in everything he does, but it addresses the needs of part of the areas. Now, interesting that you're talking about, does the town want to buy land? The comment I wanted to make, which goes back to asking the question, how did that land at Food Line ever turn in? You do know who owned that land and who sold it to the developer, specifically for the purpose of it being used for affordable housing. The town of Beaufort did.
If that's a question, I don't know if I can really answer that question.
No, I'm saying that the town of Beaufort owned that land. Where you're saying, could the town buy land? The town owned the land and decided that they didn't need all of it, and they wanted to sell it to someone that would build affordable housing. That was the first group of people who decided for some reason they couldn't do it. And interestingly, the group that came in, they're from Greenville.
So I want to keep us on track as we're talking about the ordinances and everything, and I appreciate everybody bringing forth discussions on affordable housing. We're not going to be able to move backwards on anything, but we can project forward and take these, past considerations and see where we can move forward from there.
Let me just ask you one question.
Yes,
Back
sir.
to the zoning. If you look at, and I guess it's more Kyle, if you looked at where on Professional Park Drive, where we've built our apartments, I take it that would be in the 500-year floodplain? Would it be in the,
It's in an X zone, so it's
Out.
it's outside of the special flood hazard area.
so we're talking about everything that actually is on the opposite side of Cedar. You go back Professional Park Drive to the end, going back towards Holland Rock, the
Okay.
land on that side, that is also, that's a challenging piece of property.
It is. A lot of that is, we're talking property that's east of Live Oak or 70, and yes, it's there's quite a bit of wetland, and it's quite a bit of area that's in that special flood hazard area.
So if you were looking at building multifamily housing, high density, on that side, you'd have to have a large tract of property to actually make that conform to what your new rules are?
Well, actually, our new rules would encourage only single-family residential and not multifamily in those areas.
One challenge I had when I was looking at your map was I had a hard time manipulating the map, but I saw that because I was actually looking at where I live. And I'm like, oh, you couldn't build any more multifamily housing on that side of the highway, or 70.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and that actually came out of partially, as was mentioned earlier, from the CAMA land use plan. That was critical of that, that the density, the higher density, they really wanted to take a look at putting it somewhere else other than in flood-prone areas for public safety reasons, for resiliency, for a lot of different reasons.
Right. And you, like I know, the different tracts of property that are available to build multifamily in Beaufort, pretty much most of that is on that side of the 70 at this moment. Not most, if I'm not mistaken, all of those properties that I'm considering are all zoned residential 20, R20, and are predominantly in our extraterritorial jurisdiction. So they're not necessarily in the corporate limits. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And the best way to find where that NIZ, those flood maps are, we use FRIS, so FRIS.nc.gov. That's the state's flood map website. It's really easy to use and peruse, and you can toggle between our current effective flood maps and the preliminary flood maps. So that's something that we're also taking a look at, that we've got these flood maps that are kind of on deck for review and seeing how these regulations might affect the new NIZ as it comes through those new flood mapped areas.
And just for the record, I live in a flood hazard area right now. However, as Michelle was pointing out, the new maps take me out of the special flood hazard area. So there could be properties that have more significant impact and others of us who do fairly well. So that is also something to consider. And, you know, a comment, if I may, was also made earlier tonight, and for those who are watching and those in the audience, that if you have a specific piece of property and you would like to know how this would impact you, please set up an appointment and come by and visit. Michelle will spend all the time that you need. We'll spend all the time that we need to go through that, and I think that's important. Because not everyone feels comfortable in coming to a large group or a large setting like this, but one-on-one, and that also helps us hone our skills for later on when some of these ordinances are adopted to know how to apply them because we will have had experience. So thank you for allowing me that.
Yeah, we would absolutely love to meet with folks one-on-one, look at different properties and the potential for them. Rachel, are any other comments online? Great. Are there any other questions from the room? Great. Anybody else here on the board want to make some closing comments?
Just say that we have a long way to go and that we have a lot of good ideas that we haven't yet had a chance to implement that I think will address some of these. And I agree there's I think a lot of community feedback that we can get that will help us make those decisions in an informed way so that they have the desired effect and minimize the unintended consequences.
I would agree that there's lots of moving parts here and lots of things that we're looking at that can cause change, and those unintended consequences, they need to be heard. So please reach out to the town, make your opinions known, meet with the town about your properties. I think it's really important for us to do. These are rules and regs that if they did go in place, we'd be there for years to come. Decades.
One observation I've had just from the consulting side is I think one thing we can bring forward and as we continue this process related to impervious surfaces and resilience are some examples of, this came up last night, what does it mean to be impervious, what does it mean to be pervious? And sometimes it's not so clear. And maybe some examples of how a house that is non-conforming in terms of what's impervious now, so let's say paving, could come into compliance if it needed to, and still have a patio or still have a driveway that is now pervious or considered pervious. So there are ways to come into compliance that might not be immediately in the front of mind unless you do this every day like we do. So that's probably an area where we can improve and try to communicate that to the community, because we want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
And since our consultants are here, and I might put him on the spot a little bit now, Tyson.
Kelly?
Some examples in the document itself, real examples that people can look at to gain that would be helpful. So people can see something tangible and say, okay, I can see this photo, or I can see this drawing and understand what I'm looking at, yes.
Exactly. We can do that, and this is a...
And Ryan was nodding his head, and so was Commissioner LaPiccolo, so that's good.
Yeah.
And if anyone thinks, well, one thing I think it's good to ask questions, because then we realize what gap we haven't filled, or where there may be a misunderstanding or an information gap that we need to fill in. So that's exactly, we can come up with some scenarios, I think, that paint a good picture on the impact, on the impervious surface question too. On the website is the analysis, informal such that it was, but the analysis that the subcommittee undertook to come up with, or try to get into the range of what a fair number would be. Because when it comes to impervious surface, if you're coming from an environmental point of view or stormwater management point of view, the idea would be, 100% perviousness, I suppose. So coming from the other way is basically fairness to the community and to the development community. And then you're just sort of working within those two numbers. So it's not arbitrary by any means, but it isn't magical either. So what we're trying to do, or what I see the committee trying to do, is balance those two important things in a community that, if you're like us in Charleston, everywhere else, you're flooding more and more. So that's online. That study's on the conveyor site.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming out. This was great.
All right, thank you.
Gotta get to the point where, like, the forest fire, it's helping a lot of lost people in the historic district.